Hi, I'm John Newman and welcome to my converted barn studio here in Kent, where I spend a lot of my time. This is where I made my track, Fire in Me, my recent single, and I'm going to talk you through it now.
You got a fire in me. I never wanna let it go. I never wanna let it go. I still got a fire in me. I never wanna let it go.
I first came across the track from my mind in Denmark, and it was weird because basically I went out to collect my missus, my fiance now, and I think she was at the time, because she was moving to London. So I said I'd drive her here to London. And when I went out, I took a couple of days there because the drive's like 15 hours. And my brother, who's a songwriter, James, he said, "Oh, I'm going to a session," and his father has organised it in Denmark. And I'm so bad at writing camps. I'm not good with people in that sort of manner. And so I was like, but then I heard there was a lot of good people going, so I went. And I got put in a room with a guy called Phil Plasted and David Moretz, and there was numerous people coming in and out. And it really started with the lyric. And I just remember going outside for a fag, we'd kind of like put down this little guitar riff, which I'll play. It's basically, the funny thing about this guitar riff is it's always been the same one from the start, which we have never taken out, and it still sounds so awful. But there was something like really special about that like kept it going through, and I think it was that first inspired the song. And just when you listen to it, you can hear there's something that I quite like, because the room that we're in, it had like a certain ambience. It had that like kind of warehousey ambience, and you started picking that up. And as soon as me and David started cutting it and chopping it from my awful guitar playing in a booth, we just started getting this sound that like just really pushed what I was trying to get across, which was a real rawness and a roughness and something with edge. And once we'd got that down, and we kind of kept just sitting on that, and I think we just had a kick down. It then started taking on a new life, and I went outside for a fag, and I just remember none of the lyrics rhyme, and none of the lyrics, there's no formula to these lyrics. Normally in lyrics there's a formula, there's a rhyme and there's a structure, and I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to go, here's the fucking vibe, like I need to put this down, like. And it was basically, the lyric was inspired by going through a period of my life which I put out single after single, and I was getting number one. I had 3 number ones in a row, pretty much, of my first singles off of records or features. I had a number 2 with Come and Get It, and it was just like I was on a roll, and I felt like there was a little bit of a decline in my second record. So, and then I wasn't very well, so, and then the press stories of my music would be becoming bigger than the music due to illness, due to relationship statuses of co-producers I was working with, to other things. And I felt like I couldn't breathe in music. I felt like I couldn't breathe in the industry. I felt like every word I said became to do with somebody else's relationship when I had never had an intention to, and I was being blamed for that. And I also felt like that every other word that I said was then being related to my health issues. It's when that took over, I was like, I need to take a break. The music's declining not as much, and the stories are taking over. And that's when I took a break. And I can happily sit here now, and it's weird that I say happily, that I can sit here now. And that's the best thing I've ever done, because it gave me clarity. And when it came into making this track, I wanted to write the clarity that I needed, the inspiration of being, felt quite frankly, thrown out of a party and not being invited back in, and trying to get back into that party almost. So that was Fire in Me for me, and it actually worked. I was driving around continuously putting the window down, and I think it's when it gets to the pre, where is it? I always get to this bit.
Hey, what's the spark in the night? Could you drown me out? So I'll sunny side. I'll burn
And it's this moment right here where I end up shouting down the streets of London, "Go on, lad!" And it's just like, this tune to me is such a motivational thing. And I'm so glad that it was a tune that I wrote. Looking back at it now and its success and things like that, were there decisions made that maybe weren't quite right? I recently put tweets out saying it frustrates me and it breaks my heart the most that the music that I love doesn't react to as much as I'd want it. I'd want to play at stadiums and things like that. I feel like I'm at 5% of my success, but it feels like this was the right move. It was reset, but going back to old John Newman almost. It's amazing because it's setting up the future. But in terms of the track and the production, I've been through a few meltdowns on it, like what it should be and how it should be and things. And I was like listening to a lot of radio. I think I've got the old Pro Tools session, and this is from when it first kind of like started going. And as you can listen, I was like, right, if I'm coming back, I need people to feel like they're listening to a relevance, like something that they remember, from a blast from the past almost, because I did a track called Ole, which skewed a little bit off course and things like that. So I was like, oh, I've got to go full John Newman, and you can hear it here. I mean, especially when it gets to like through this half of this chorus. And it's just like the drums are just so heavy, and the string line was a reference to Love Me Again. Even the chords that I started with was a reference to Love Me. The reference to Love Me Again. It's actually in the same key as that I play Love Me Again live. And the whole idea was, it was to make people feel like this was familiar. It was a familiar sound, and that they'd already. It was to re-engage people. But like, it was then after listening to it more and more and more that them strings in that chorus, that them drums like just smashing through that section. I mean, there's not much more of a reference to Love Me Again than I could do, really. But it was just like, and then when I was preparing to get this record together, which the record I'm still putting together, I was kind of going through all my influences and going, right, where's John Newman now? Because I can't just release a tune that sounds just like Love Me Again, because everyone's going to be like, there's no development here. I don't feel like this is moving forward. But I still wanted to keep that reference. So the first thing that I kind of took out was the strings, and started working on a new version. And this was about Christmas. And there was things like I was taking from pop music, like a more mature sounding finessed beat, stripping it all back and rebuilding. I remember I sat in this studio and it was Christmas Eve or something like that. And I just had a major freak out. I was like, no, I'm releasing the wrong production. I need to get this remixed and re-go again and do this again. And it was really weird. I was like, how do I pull these elements new? And there was quite a lot of brass, like doing bum, ba-dum, bum, and all that, like in the choruses of the first version. And I was like, I want to keep that brass element. I want to keep that reference. So every producer's best friend, Splice, called me up. And was it this one? Was the thing that inspired me to do a new production. And that became this one right here. And I have to confess that it was New Rules by Dua Lipa that I listened to, because how the brass was used in that, because I know Dua Lipa's background and it comes from a really soul side. But I like that she keeps these instrumental elements to keep her influences involved. And I was like, okay, so what would I do to keep that brass influence. But as soon as you start like putting it with other things, like it started becoming a pop record, and I was like, okay, I'm kind of like really onto something now. And and all of a sudden it started becoming a major pop record, and I was like, okay, now this is really pop. So there's things in that track that like I needed to like, I mean, that kick I added in. There was things in this track that I really needed to start bringing back in. And we touched upon the acoustic before. And like I said, it was really key to keep that in, because again, when you listen to it now, it's like crazy rough, and in conjunction to what we have here, he started like creating this roughness again and bringing it back in. There's like some mad effects that I wanted to keep in there, like lion roars and things like that that come in before the chorus as well. On Tribute, my first record, and like in general, I take quite a lot of influence from like cinematic stuff. When it comes to like using native instruments plugins, I tend to lean towards the damaged kind of drums and action strikes and orchestral brass sounds and action strings and things like that. The whole first record, and that's only when I'm in the box, like then I'd like to go down to rack, for example, and use an orchestra to do these things. But them orchestral sounds and them cinematic sounds that you get from films and things like that, I think they're there for a reason, which is to give you a feeling of something. And it sounds so mental because you can't really hear this in the track, but just when you listen back to this, I mean, I mean, it's just ridiculously massive. And when it's in the track, it's more of a flavour and a feeling and a suggestion towards a feeling of like the body more than being like standing out too much. And when I sent it to Manny to mix, I was like, these need to, and Mark had agreed, Mark Ralph, that these needed to be mixed so perfectly. So it was like a feeling, so you felt it. It wasn't like, oh, did you hear that mental lion roar? And then I'll take the walls I'm inside, and I'll burn them down, 'cause I still got a fire in me. And you can't even hear him in the mix much, and it was to underlie the vocal and things like that. There's other things like pitched vocals that give you that feeling and stuff that kind of really throw it into that section. Which up here, which it just gives you that like driving, moving forward feeling from the bottom. You got a fire in me. And also makes it quite cutting edge and current, and makes it a production that I've not done before. Yeah, I was like, throughout that period I was wanting to make music, but not quite knowing what to do. I was like kind of trying to reference everyone and do everything. And then I realised that's a positive thing, because I did that on my first record. I kind of pulled references in from everywhere, and I was really trying to write I Can't Feel My Face by The Weeknd, and it was just the production by Max Martin that was just so on point. It was slick, but it had such a vibe. And when I sat down with Mark Ralph, I was like, what do we do to give it that feeling? And that really comes from the bass. And when you listen to I Can't Feel My Face, the bass, yeah, it's great. I mean, Max has layered up two basses at like a subbier kind of down bass. But the main thing driving it is the snare. So in today's world of music, we just took the snare from that. I didn't want it to feel too rough, too polished almost, because it is really polished and quite American in I Can't Feel My Face. So we used the Valhalla vintage verb. I use it all the time. This is a setting that Mark prefers, which is called Very Nice Hall. It's in the 80s setting. I have it set to about 0.24, about 25 to 30% on the mix. And The Valhalla is amazing because it just gives you this really kind of rough, grainy feel. Another thing that I tend to use, I haven't got it set on this channel, but if you actually do your command on the, if you do Alt on there, you get up the old Logic plugins. And one that I use for everything is called Guitar Amp Pro. And I stole this idea from Greg Kirsten. And what you do is you basically put a clean tube amp on it and a modern setting, and then just DI it and go into the effects, into the verb, put a small spring on it, so the 2.2, and just turn it down nicely. And you start getting more. And it just like creates this massive sound using a guitar amp, and it makes it quite slappy and quite springy. And it was a thing that had like developed more and more through Rack and working with Amp Whiting on the first record, that we were like running through stuff through guitar amps and stuff like that. And then when I went to do the second record, I saw that Greg Kirsten was doing it, but in this kind of way, and I was like, that's actually amazing. So I'm just like really scared of the day that Apple or Logic's developers decide that the legacy plugins now aren't needed, because then I'm gonna have to actually start plugging stuff back in my studio. But yeah, another thing that was like really important was the kick. So we referenced the kick from I Can't Feel My Face to get that bottom end. Then when it came to December and me doing another thing, it didn't feel like we'd quite got it for the pop radio element to what I was trying to bring to it. So, I mean, the kick we just got absolutely pumping. It almost sounds like a really hard techno tune, like a German techno tune. But it's funny when you start, it's because what we had was the bass is so funk that and this, I always do this on all my, I don't know why I've used channel EQ, but I have. I always push my treble on basses just to make sure that it's like pushing out a little bit, and especially when it's being complemented by the Moog one that we put in there as well. Because when you start putting them together, you start thinking of that I Can't Feel My Face thing again. And then you have your massive, big German techno kicks, and basically you start heading forward, and if you add the snare as well. And then it wouldn't be a John Newman record without the big damage drums that I was talking about from the cinematic inspirations. And again, the key thing is that throughout this whole track, and as you can see it here in my template, in my thing, the acoustic is running right through the whole track, because it's the most important thing to me in that track, because it's the thing that references back to what I had and where it all started. So as soon as you put all that together, and everything starts heading forward. And then it was a thing that I was like, right, and there's a hint to like the track exploding into more of like and it starts giving you that impression. But then the clever thing about it, that when it goes into this new section with the trumpet we spoke about before that I got from Splice and things like that and edited. Oh, by the way, that wasn't just a trumpet I took. I sound shifted it down 3 to give it a bottom end. I used my Verb Suite Classics because I love that so much, the play on there. That's amazing. And oh yeah, Oral Exciter. That's my inspiration from Motown. Basically, exciters were run on everything in Motown. And it was a thing that when I was producing records before my first record and thinking about Love Me Again and everything. What I did is sat in my room for ages. I can now tell you which songs were recorded in which Motown studio and everything like that, from the positionings of the drums and everything. So a thing that I always do to keep influence and things that I do is put the aural exciter on a lot of things. In this case, it's on that brass, which is, again, a really key thing. And I was trying to get that soul element from it. But what I was saying is that it gives you the... It feels like it's going to actually go into a rhythm that's pulling backwards. And then I decided to go straight on it. I thought, do you know what? I'm going to go straight, but putting that little Latino influence as well. And the most important thing, again there, to make it go straight, to make it move forward, is that. Yeah, literally, like I said, I think it was the first note. Which then, if we turn off the sound shifter, in fact, if we turn off everything. Which I believe I've probably already proved. There, it's the last note. And I put a little, basically reversed it as well in the beginning bit, just so it dropped in, so it's got like that smooth flowing feeling. I just took the back end and reversed it into the beginning of it. So then you get that. And then once you put all these back in, and that's the trumpet that saved my soul. Yeah, again, there was things like, yeah, these are still the references to the older music and what I wanted to, like, still include in my music now. And it's like things like... And again, it's not something that, you know, if that was way too loud in the mix, for example, we like cranked it right up, and if I added an EQ that sent it through the roof, then, this is Fab Filter, I use this on everything, by the way. This is my favorite filter. Then, for example, if I did this, everything just starts getting so muddy and messy. So I think it's more about these things being sat in there and locking as a rhythm and locking as a feeling. Again, like I was talking about, like the roars and the builds and things like that. It's not about like using these massive sounds as like right at the forefront. For me, in my music, I know that other people do, but for me, it's about having feelings and things moving through. Talking of that, I actually think that in that effects thing that I just showed you here, my car is in it. We decided to put my phone out the window of my car and record that because I wanted to give the feeling of me driving the car. When I wrote it in Denmark, I was driving my missus back and I played it about 20 times and she was like, please stop playing it. This is when she wasn't asleep and I was doing all the driving. And then when I got back here, I was like, I want to get my car in it. I was like, I feel like I need to get the car in it. So that's... sat in the underlying bit of that as well. It's just like so many mad things that I wanted to get in here. All is like kind of personal references. I tend to put a lot of personal references in my track. In other music, I've definitely done the Beatles, reverse it and put bits in backwards. I've done that quite a lot, saying a lot of things. Yeah, what I put in most tracks is basically things that I want to say that I maybe can't say in the lyrics in Morse code. So I feel like I've expressed myself and put it in. And it also sounds amazing. And when you start like putting it against like other stuff, like certain guitars and things like that, it starts getting like really weird and very Motown as well. I mean, this one here. That's actually, again, another inspiration that I've brought right through my music. It started from listening to Begging by Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons. And then I'd always have it on a little bit of tremolo with a bit of vibrato on my guitar amp and like try and beat up the guitar a little bit as much as possible to try and get that sound. Again, I'd use an oral exciter on it. And then what you start creating is a proper Motown sound. I put that in everything. And then the weird thing is if you put Morse code with that, you start getting this really bizarre, kind of amazing synth-like sounding ambience, but again, coming from an organic place. So I tend to put that in stuff. Another thing that I like to put in a lot of my music is the 90s house reference. I started as a DJ, I started as a house producer, and I like to make sure that that's kind of in everything. And I mean, this feels pretty Ibiza in the minute. That's why I like all my house collaborations, like the Calvin Harris stuff, the Kygo stuff, the Sigala stuff. It's all coming from a place that I'm really familiar with. I like to always keep getting this stuff in. Them chord progressions, them harmonies and things like that feel like a dance floor in Ibiza, that feel like Pete Tong's on the radio on Saturday night. I think they're really important to get in there. For me, it's a reference that makes me feel this atmospheric kind of emotive feeling from music, and dance music's really, really good for that. So there's always a lot of dance elements, even through to being a 4/4 kick. I think when it comes to kicks, again, as you can probably hear, what I'm going through here is I always come in from an organic route to maintain that. And that was even more key on this track, Fire in Me, to bring in two worlds and meet them in the middle. And I've always done that. Love Me Again, you know, the house piano, pretty much Blame with Calvin, where we use the guitars and everything, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's really dance or really John Newman or really whatever it is, it always comes in from the two areas. And so I think the main thing for building any of my kicks is that there's got to be a really organic one. I mean, that could be taken out of a Florence tune or a Rolling in the Deep if it was slowed down, you know. I mean, there's shitloads of plate verb on there and stuff like that, and then it was about, for me, I always use Battery, as I'm sure a lot of people do, by Native Instruments. 909's probably my favourite kit in terms of when it comes to kicks. Just because of its tone, it's got that bottom end that you need. But it's also got it's like that Lani Laurel thing, whatever it was. It's like there's two tones to it. It's got that really trebly thing that's going to push through on radio. But then it's also got that deep kind of thing. Again, bringing in two worlds together. It's got pop radio, but it's got that kind of club kind of sound. So then when you put that with what we had, it starts. I don't know why I haven't got a compressor on it. I'd normally compress it. My favourite compressor is one that people don't actually really use, not that I've heard of. It's called Supercharger GT. It comes with Native Instruments. The main reason I really like it is because you look at it, it already looks pop. It looks like, I don't know, there's this new word that everyone's using in music. It sounds expensive. And this sounds expensive. It sounds like the radio. So I always like to use this on my kicks. I don't know why it's not on this one, but because it's already compressed the mouth. And once you start turning the saturation up, it starts really starting to become really saturated and really compressed, which makes everything sound really pop. It's actually really good on your master channel as well, if you're referencing for radio. In terms of vocal processing, we went quite 80s with this one. I think the idea was with it being in there, it was quite tricky because, like I was saying, in that section where we have all this, there's so much going on. And that section, we've already been through it all, but it's all so dark and so moody. And it's also dark and so moody that the key thing was, again, I keep comparing pop radio and organicness, but the key thing was to like make the vocal almost feel, we added a bit of chorus to it because it always had to sit here in a, not in a polished kind of reverby way, but in more of a, I can't explain it, but like a choral way almost. And what you get there is it's like sitting like a crown around what we wanted the main element to be, the drum, the bass moving forward. And then it's like sitting around the top in a really spacious way. I added to them, but that's actually Max Wolfgang's voice because he just walked in the room on the day and played a bit of bass and we were like, oh, do you want to put your vocal on it? Another reason for that being so that it felt uncluttered, so that the vocals didn't all merge into one with mine. And then it allowed my vocal to sit on the top of everything because what you've got is this bass and this grunginess with these kind of oral excited chorus edited Max's vocals, but then it just leaves this big gaping gap for me to jump in at the right time. I'm really scared to look at these other BVs because I feel like they're going to be my awful ones. That's probably it now. Yeah. I've been doing this so much recently, and it gives like, because I'm like the worst falsetto singer, I've started like putting. Never wanna let it go. I never wanna let it go. And it sounds like so awful when you separate it, but like I just generally can't do that high falsetto thing that a lot of the polished Americans or the polished artists can do. But what I've started feeling like it gives me is like, it gives us like a subtle female element to the track, a lightness. And it also gives, I don't know, just like a whisper. It gives like, it rounds off the vocals for some reason. I mean, it sounds so awful, but then as soon as you're on, never wanna let it go. I never wanna let it go. I never wanna let it go. I never wanna let it go. And then it just sounds really round, and I think that's what it does. I've done it a lot more in other stuff now. I've started using it a bit wetter as well, and almost whispering it a little more. You can do it on lead vocals and everything, and it actually creates like this effect that it almost sounds like an amazing plugin that's like creating that. Talking of amazing plugins, I use this in my studio all the time now. And I was sat in Diplo's studio with him, and I was kind of watching him, and then he was like, hey dude, sing through this. I was like, what is it? And then it's called a voice live rack. And it literally sounds like any of Kanye's albums post his second. And it sounds like any Travis Scott record or anything. Yet you get these amazing harmonies, and it starts like, to create harmonies as well, you then get a reference to where them points are and things. It's honestly like one of the most amazing pieces of equipment I've got in the studio. And this Kemper as well is pretty amazing. That's basically, you can reference any guitar amp or input, like basically any guitar effects stuff. That's another must buy. But yeah, that TC Helicon thing's amazing. The reason I said that is because it does inspire a lot of the harmonies, and it sounds like it's probably come from there, this one as well. I never wanna let it go. I never wanna let it go. Just with them clashy notes and things like that. In terms of, I know that I definitely used it in this section actually. Here we go. This is the TC Helicon. If you turn the reverb off, listen to it dry. The stacks are just like amazing and like sound like really auto-tuned and really set. Sounds amazing. It sounds like literally every like American trap record at the moment. It's so good. Do not remember doing that.
I'll burn them down.
I tend to use sound shift to pitch for everything. Everyone else use alter boy, don't they? But I don't know why, I just like to edit the whole thing. But the good thing is about alter boy is that you maintain it in key, whereas sound shift to pitch, you have to find a new third or fifth for it, for stuff. But I always find it like really interesting to know where, I want to know where that's coming from. Oh my God, there is something there. All right, this could be fun.
I still got a fire in me.
That's amazing. So that sounded a bit like, and then, yeah, I've just taken the I off of I, the.
I still got a fire in me.
And then I've pitched it up mainly. And I've had, I love using this. It's also quite nice because I get Manny to mix my records when you send it, and you're using his plugin as well. And then just delay designer. I love Logic's delay designer. I like that you can map it out, you can draw it, and you can fully edit it, and it's not too like hard set on what they think you should create almost. That's amazing.
Fire. I still got.
Into that.
I'll burn them down.
Oh, the things we do for the smallest things. Yeah, there was again when there was like that the pitched bit here. Again, I used sound shift to pitch for this bit. Just chucked it down an octave.
You got a fire in me.
Sounds ridiculous. What else did I use in this track? I was just saying before when you Nexus and the stupid licensing things and having two studios, first world problems, but not having my licensing thing. But luckily I've got the stem. This was a thing that I work with Sigala a lot. I often ask him what plugins he uses. I use VPS Avenger that he's got and use the tropical house setting and things like that. You just achieve like, when doing that, I think there's a behind the scene formula is that like Nexus and everything like that is that it's been used on records quite a lot. It's been used in the charts and on radio. So somebody that doesn't know about music is just relevant to them, is what relevant is. So I think it's always, when Sigala's smashing out big tunes, it's always good to keep asking him what synths he's using and stuff like that, so it sounds relevant, especially when I've already worked with him. So I think the marimba was really key in this track, again, to put it in that pop area, because it's so funny when you start pulling apart the stems of this track, it just completely sounds like a different track if you want to. I think that's what I like about it, but all them rough sounds that we were on about before, they're the things that have created it to sound in a different way, in a rough and ready way. But thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope I didn't ramble on too much, and I feel slightly exposed because I've given away all my tricks of the trade, but I guess that's what these videos are about. Again, thank you so much for watching. You can buy Fire in Me now, and stay tuned for more new music coming very, very soon.